All right, there we go. So welcome everybody. My name is Brad Waldschmidt. I'm an engineer who is a consultant who works with the Nashville Department of Transportation on their neighborhood street traffic calming program. And we're here tonight to talk about Annex Avenue. And I will hand it over to my colleague Ellie to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Ellie Finn. I'm helping out with this traffic calming meeting. If you guys have any questions or anything and want to put them in the chat, I'm going to be monitoring that so we can make sure to address those at the end of the presentation. Thanks.
Excellent. Appreciate it, Ellie. So what we'd like to do with everybody tonight is to spend about 10 or 15 minutes on a presentation, talking about the traffic calming program, how Annex Avenue got selected, some of the options to maybe hopefully slow some vehicle speeds along Annex Avenue, and then kind of what the next steps might look like now that you've been selected. So as Ellie mentioned, there's a few ways, we're gonna have a 15-minute presentation, but we're gonna stay as long as we need to make sure we answer any questions you have. You can either wait until the end of the 15-minute presentation if you want to come off of mute and ask some questions, or at any time you can also type some questions in the chat, which if you're in the WebEx, I believe is usually in the lower right corner. There's a chat box where you can type in your questions if you prefer questioning that way, and Ellie will sort of monitor that. So yeah, so let's go ahead and get into the presentation. Real quick, I just want to make sure, Ellie, can you come off of mute and tell me, are you able to see the title slide?
Yes, I can see it
Excellent.
perfectly.
Appreciate it. Just want to make sure it was coming through. Thank you, Ellie. Um, all right, so what is traffic calming? Well, it's the neighborhood street traffic calming program. It's focusing on residential streets. We're really working on those physical solutions to encourage lower vehicle speeds along that street. So we like to talk about 3 E's of traffic calming, and the first is education. This meeting is a wonderful example of education where we, as the engineers, can educate you all on some traffic calming options, but you all being the experts of your street because you live in this neighborhood. You have a lot you can educate us with in addition to the data that we've collected. So that's why we love these educational opportunities really for all parties involved. The second D is enforcement. Enforcing the posted speed limits is absolutely part of the traffic calming uh, part. That's law enforcement, being out there and actually enforcing the speeds, absolutely a part of it. However, at NDOT, it's not something NDOT has a lot of jurisdiction over. So while it is something, one of the 3 E's, it's not something that NDOT can really be involved with, but NDOT can be involved with this 30, the engineering, actually looking at the streets and the road to find ways to modify the road to really encourage slower vehicle speeds. So something that's very important to Nashville and NDOT is safety for all users and vision zero, a vision of maybe hopefully having 0 deaths on our streets one day. We like to show this graphic. It's very important to note that in the really unfortunate accident where a pedestrian gets hit by a moving vehicle, they have an 89% chance of surviving if that car is traveling about 25 miles per hour. If you look at the far right here, if that car is going 45 miles per hour, that pedestrian has a 35% chance of survival. This is important to us. We really want to work on slowing vehicle speeds on streets. So if the unfortunate thing happens where a pedestrian is struck by a moving vehicle, we want that speed of the vehicle to be as slow as possible to really increase those chances of survival. So this is one of the main reasons why the traffic calming program is very important to Nashville and to us engineers at NDOT. So there are over 450 streets in Nashville that a resident, or a group of residents have applied for asking for traffic calming, over 450. And most recently, it's about 8 or 9 weeks ago now, 26 of those streets were chosen of the 450. And of those 26, one of them was Annex Avenue. And that's why we're here talking today, because someone submitted an application. It was in that large group, and of them, Annex was selected. So we like to make sure everyone understands how Annex was selected. We went and did a traffic count, and we looked at how fast cars are actually going on Annex Avenue. And the worse the speeding problem is, the higher they're going to score to get traffic calming. We also look at things like how many cars per day are on the street. Are there things like schools and parks nearby that are encouraging people to want to walk to them? We also look at whether there's sidewalks or bike lanes on the street. We also look at things like if there is a history of any pedestrian injuries or even worse, a pedestrian fatality in the past 10 years on that street. All 450 streets, we look at this for every single one of them. And 8 or 9 weeks ago, Annex Avenue was scored in the top 26, which is why we're here talking about it today. Just Annex Avenue, we are looking at the section that goes from Robertson Avenue up to the north and traveling all the way through the 90-degree curve there, ending at the Thunderbird Drive intersection. I believe if it's not all of, it's almost all of Annex Avenue, but I believe it may be all of Annex Avenue. And then here's some of the information we collected. You can see there the 85th percentile speed is 38 miles per hour. That's one of our traffic engineering measurements we typically use. That 38 miles per hour is definitely well above the posted speed limit. That's probably one of the reasons why Annex Avenue scored a little higher than some of those other streets. And then just for information, you can see there's a little over 4,000 cars a day driving on Annex Avenue. But yeah, so that's what we're here to talk about. And here's a graph of some of the streets. The green street that kind of runs right through that Charlotte Park label there, that's the Annex Avenue. Again, you all, many of you, if not all of you, will live out along here, but we always like to show location maps. So yeah, Annex Avenue there from Robertson all the way down through the curve and then ending at Thunderbird Drive. So we want to shift and kind of talk through, if Annex Avenues, we're considering traffic calming, what are some of our options? What are some tools in the toolkit for the Neighborhood Street Traffic Calming Program? So one of the more popular and common toolkit solutions is these speed cushions. They are modular rubber devices. At their highest point above the pavement, they're about 3 inches. Their width is 6 feet, and their lengths can vary. We vary them depending on the conditions and the engineering. And so one of the things that this has been very effective, proven to be very effective around Nashville for slowing vehicle speeds. You notice there's a bullet here that says reduced impact to emergency response vehicles. Let me go to the next slide and elaborate a little bit, and then come back to this slide. I think that'll make a little more sense. So another option here is these speed tables. I'll go back to the speed cushions real quick. You'll see there's these gaps. They're kind of narrower speed cushions, but sometimes there's 2 of them on the road. Sometimes there's 3 of them on the road with the gaps in between. Speed tables are very similar. They're also black modular rubber devices, 3 inches in height. The difference is, as you can see in these pictures, is they extend across the entire pavement. So it can also be very effective with traffic calming. There's a few streets in Nashville with some speed tables, but many more with speed cushions. One of the reasons is when Nashville looks at traffic calming, we are looking to slow vehicle speeds. And that does mean that all vehicles may have a reduced speed. That includes emergency vehicles. That includes things like ambulances or fire trucks. Sometimes you may need to really get somewhere to respond pretty quickly. So when you look at these speed tables, any vehicle will have to go over these pretty much the same way, whether it's a personal automobile or one of those emergency vehicles. I'm gonna go to the previous slide. So one of the things that these gaps, the speed cushions allow, is personal vehicles still have to go over these speed cushions. Some may choose to go over them with both of their wheel paths. Some may want to have one wheel path go in the gap and only one of the wheels goes over the speed cushion. Emergency vehicles, specifically fire trucks and ambulances, do have a wider axle and wider wheelbase. So their front wheels can actually straddle these speed cushions and go right over them. Now their back wheels, with all the added weight back there, they still do ride up on sort of the ramps on the left side and the right side of each cushion. So they do get impacted a little bit, but emergency vehicles do have less of an impact when these speed cushions get installed compared to the speed tables. So that's why I just want to compare these two and what that reduced compared to the speed tables comment. One thing we'd like to note is NDOT is doing before and after studies throughout this year The NDOT, our team expects to collect many more before and after studies. What we're seeing is speed cushions are proving effective. They are slowing vehicle speeds, whether you're looking at the average speed or again that traffic engineering term, that 85th percentile speed. Either way, we're seeing speed cushions be effective at slowing down cars on these residential streets. We expect to get more data points as the year progresses and update this slide, but so far we're seeing a lot of positive results when the speed cushions get installed. Another option are these radar feedback signs. They're just like they look here in the picture. They show your speed in Nashville if you're going too fast. So if that 30 was actually a 31, it would turn red. It would turn red to sort of let people know you're not doing something you're supposed to be doing. You can see these have had an impact in some places. It truly depends on the location. Oftentimes, these do have a positive result in lowering vehicle speeds, but some streets it doesn't have as much of an impact. Like that's the truth. And so there are some times where these are the right choice and sometimes not, but they are a tool, and we have put them on many streets in Nashville. And their effectiveness can vary from street to street. Another option that we use is these narrowing using the white edge line pavement markings. If you look at each of these photos, before the traffic calming program, those white edge lines did not exist on either side. It was just a very wide piece of pavement. Even the narrowing of adding those white lines, it just when you're driving as a motorist on the street, you just feel like it's a little narrower, even though we haven't modified the pavement at all. And so that was done on both of these streets. Again, just a very minor change, but it can have a positive impact just to slow speed motorists just down a little bit. So we do look at that sometimes, especially when the streets are a little wider with the pavement width. Another option are these neighborhood traffic circles. Now, you may have driven through some very large roundabouts, through little more higher traffic streets. These are much, much smaller and meant for lower volume neighborhood streets. We can certainly consider these at a few intersections. We do have to make sure that school buses can navigate around them. And so that can sometimes be a challenging geometric design, but we're certainly willing to consider those if there's interest. But oftentimes the intersections are not large enough to fit these. So it's possible, but we can take a look if anybody has any interest in that. But oftentimes they are a challenge to fit on many of Nashville's neighborhood streets. I think this is the last slide here. Bulb outs on the left, where we've been looking at adding some of these white flexible delineators. Again, just to sort of narrow the road, but add a little bit of a vertical measure, those white vertical delineators there. And then on the right side is an example of a chicane where vehicles have to kind of turn their steering wheel to the right and then to the left just to stay in their travel lane. Even that turning of the steering wheel sort of naturally causes people to slow down just a little bit. And so there are a few spots in Nashville where we've also incorporated these chicanes, again, usually on a little bit wider streets. So we're here to talk about traffic calming. We do want to make sure we have you covered if there's anything outside of traffic calming that you want to ask about. Hub Nashville is a wonderful resource. You can either call 311 or you can go to hub.Nashville.gov. That can be things for like if there's a traffic signal that doesn't look like it's doing what it should. If you feel like a sign is needed, maybe it's more stop signs or anything like that. Those are kind of things that are not necessarily traffic calming, but you can absolutely make those requests, and the right people at Metro Nashville will take that ticket. Also, if there's fallen tree limbs or a clogged storm drain, all of these things are very important. Engineers at NDOT want to know about it, but they really rely on the partnership for citizens to be able to use either 311 or hub.Nashville.gov. If you have any questions about walking or biking, sidewalks or bikeways, Anna Dearman here is the person at NDOT who really helps with those things. And then if you ever want to look into things like an adopt a street or a neighborhood cleanup, JD Lane at Nashville. So anyways, just want to make sure anything outside of traffic calming, these are some great resources that we like to make sure neighbors and citizens know about. But for traffic calming, we're your team. We're here. We're definitely going to answer your questions. So we want to put something up here. We have put together a very initial concept design for this traffic calming program. And I say initial and concept because we have not done our site visit yet. We always do our site visits after this first meeting, but we like to just show everybody sort of what a traffic calming uh, design might look like on a street like Annex Avenue. So this is what we've attempted to do. Now, if you'll bear with us, if you look at the north arrow, it's pointing to the right. So when you look at a map, you kind of have to rotate it 90 degrees. So it's a little off rotation so it can all fit on here. This isn't final, but we just kind of wanted to show everybody kind of what could be possibly expected. So if we start at the south there near Annex Avenue and Thunderbird Drive, everywhere you see these trapezoids with the yellow C, we're proposing a set of speed cushions, maybe ones that look like that photo up in the upper right corner. So everywhere you see this trapezoid with a C, you might want our concept design saying you may see something just like that photo in each of those locations. And so counting up here, it could be something like 4 of these locations between Thunderbird Drive and Capri Drive. And then maybe one location between Capri and Starliner because those always stops. And then as we go past north of Starliner, you'll see I have to go to a separate slide. There's a second sheet because Annex Avenue is so long. So you'll see there's that one near just north of River Rouge Drive. And then here's that second one in front of the school, and then another 4 between the American Road always stop and then the Robertson Avenue intersection. So let me go back real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm counting about 11 speed cushion locations. So that's kind of what we like to just show people. That's what a traffic calming design could look like. After we do our site visit and hear your feedback and finalize a design, we may end up with 10 locations or 12, or it could be 11. But somewhere in this range is likely what I think everyone could expect for what an effective traffic calming design could look like. We usually try to focus them to be spaced a certain distance apart from each other, also spaced a certain distance from stop signs, and we rarely, if ever, place them right in front of people's driveways. We try to avoid that. So that's kind of how we've come up with these initial thoughts. Definitely open to getting your feedback here. I think we're about 1 or 2 slides left. Real quick, we want to make sure everybody knows where we are at with this project. So we're here at meeting number 1. The next steps after this meeting, we're going to take your feedback. We're going to take that concept design and we're going to do a site visit, get a few more measurements, put in a more specific design that shows exactly where each set of speed cushions is proposed, whose front yard it's in front of, whose driveway it's near. We don't have that level of detail yet, but we will. And once we get that design, we'll then have a second meeting, very similar to this meeting, to look at that final design in much greater detail. And then there will be an online ballot where property owners adjacent to Annex will have the chance to vote. Everyone will get to vote. Yes, we want the traffic calming design for Annex Avenue, or no, we don't want it. And if there's enough votes, if there's 2/3 of the voters vote yes, NDOT's going to make it happen. And if the 2/3 mark is not met, then it will not happen. So that's the kind of a unique process through the traffic calming program is, and this application was made by someone along Annex Avenue. NDOT's going to prepare a design that we as engineers are comfortable with. The final decision will be back to the property owners along Annex Avenue for whether it happens or not. So that's the conclusion of our presentation. So really appreciate it. What I want to ask now is if you want to come off of mute and ask questions, you're free to do so. Ellie, I will ask if you could come off of mute. Have we had any questions in the chat if people have preferred that method?
Yeah, we have one question in the chat from Stu, and Stu, if you want to speak for yourself, you can go ahead. But it looks like they are having a bit of a problem with the number of speed limit signs on Annex, and if NDOT has any control in evaluating the signage and what's appropriate.
Yes. So thank you, Ellie. And thank you for your question, Stu. So the answer is yes. We can do 2 things. The first thing is we do have an upcoming meeting with our NDOT team that we can bring this question to them and ask is, hey, part of this Annex Avenue traffic calming project, can we look into some additional speed limit signs? I'm not sure what the answer is going to be, but we can definitely ask that. I will go back though to this slide right here. I would encourage you, Stu, to also either call 311 or go to hub.nashville.gov and make this request as well. I would just say let's approach it from two different sides. If you want to do the Hub Nashville approach, we'll also ask on your behalf Wednesday when we talk with some of our NDOT partners, and we'll see what we can do.
Doesn't look like there are any other questions in the chat.
Okay. Well, yeah. Does anybody want to come off of mute and have any comments or questions?
This is Sarah Stewart. I'm the beautification commissioner for District 20. Excuse me.
Oh, okay.
Um, so, but I'm here for Mary Carolyn Roberts, our council person. But what about trucks? Because there are no truck signs, but the trucks do cut through
Mm,
from Charlotte Park to Robertson. So, will this reduce the trucks? Will it discourage the trucks?
gotcha. So I want to make sure I understand the question first. So if I'm understanding you correctly, this street of Annex Avenue does have, I'm going to call it the no heavy trucks signs, but
Right.
it sounds like you're observing that some of those trucks are still using it. Is that right?
That is very correct. Yes.
Okay. So what I will say is I'll go back to the three E's where education, enforcement, and engineering. Sounds like uh, I- well, hopefully the trucks are being educated because the signs are there. Enforcement sounds like an enforcement issue, but again, NDOT isn't really part of the enforcement. But we can do something about the engineering, and you know, this traffic calming program cannot dictate who drives on what public street. Um, so it's from an engineering standpoint, we can't do much to require trucks to not drive this road. But what we can do if they're wanting to travel at unsafe speeds, we can work with the neighborhood like here like we are in this meeting to maybe consider some traffic calming solutions so that all vehicles must go a little slower on Annex Avenue, and maybe that'll deter some of them, maybe not, can't really make a promise, but if any of them think this is some route where they can go faster, I would think that the traffic calming design would certainly help alleviate that along with anybody else who wants to drive too fast.
Thank you. I think this is wonderful.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the feedback.
One other, I don't know if it's something that you would have any part of, but the intersection of Thunderbird and Annex and Cabot. I know Cabot is another traffic calming project, but the intersection where Annex meets Cabot and Thunderbird is an awkwardly lined up four-way stop. And would a traffic circle work better there? Because people get confused that it's a four-way stop and they don't wait for their turn, and it's it gets to be a very bad intersection.
Right. I understand your question, having driven through it a few times, probably not as many as other people on this call. But I will say that a traffic circle, as far as the neighborhood traffic calming, probably wouldn't be very effective. And the reason why is the traffic calming program doesn't, widen any roads. It certainly
Mhm.
does not take any right of way or land. That's not what the traffic calming program does. We want to take the existing road and the pavement and do something on it to really slow speeds. My initial thought is that Cabot may have to be, realigned, and I'm starting to kind of talk a lot more like a capital project and
Yeah.
not something like a traffic calming program. So as an engineer, I'm very intrigued on like what a roundabout could do if that intersection was realigned. But as the traffic calming program person with Ellie here, I don't know if it's something the traffic calming program could really do much for.
Okay. That's great. I'm glad you're interested in that intersection.
Yeah. So as an engineer, I am, but for traffic calming, yeah, I don't know
Of
if we
course.
could really fit. Yeah, I don't know if we could fit a traffic circle in there because of how odd it is shaped.
And there's the steep it's a bigger than a ditch, whatever it should be called.
Mm,
The If it could be filled, there might be room, depending on who owns that corner.
gotcha. Gotcha. I like the idea, but that may not be a traffic calming program thing we can
Yeah.
really address.
Okay.
Yeah. That's great. What other comments or feedback or anything does the group have?
I am still monitoring the chat, everyone, so if you don't feel comfortable speaking up, you can throw it in there. I'll do it for you.
So right, so again, we're here at meeting 1. Our next steps would be to go out and do some more measurements, make sure we know how wide the road is everywhere. We can't put speed cushions on very steep hills. So we also look at some of your hills out here and make sure that we measure them to see how steep they are. Initially, I didn't think there were too many steep hills on Annex Avenue, but we still like to make sure. So I feel like what could be reasonably expected is that we would have a more detailed design, and then maybe we could have a second meeting similar to this one about 8 weeks from now. Maybe it's 6. I hope it's not 10, but maybe 6 to 8 weeks from now. That would sort of be the time frame. And then after that second meeting, if all looks good, then that online ballot would happen. But I think our time for maybe a second meeting like this would be maybe 6, but 8 weeks would be a good estimate, just so the group kind of has that in mind. Well, great. Well, yeah, we're happy to stay on if anybody has anything more, but don't want to delay anybody. If everyone is satisfied with what they're seeing.
Thank you very, very much. It looks great, and hopefully it'll all work out.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the feedback. And if we don't have any more questions or thoughts, well, again, we don't want to rush anybody out, but yeah, it seems like no one else has any comments or questions. So happy to adjourn the meeting if everyone else is okay with that. All right. Well,
It's like we're good in the chat.
yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Ellie. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and hope you all have a good rest of your evening.